So I like to think of the market sizing framework as 3 golden rules. So 3 things, as I said before, 3 is easy to remember, it's not too much. So 3 golden rules you always have to follow. First one, and the most important one, is always use a tree to structure your problem. Always. Doesn't matter whether it is a mix of business situation and market sizing, or even for business situation cases, we're going to see later, you can always use boxes and trees like the proving principle of Barbara Minton. The second one, the second golden rule is you have to find a trade-off. It's the 80-20. A trade-off between being fast and being accurate. We're going to talk about all of those in detail. And the third and last one is always do sanity checks. So what's a sanity check? It's when you get to an answer and you ask yourself, does that make sense? Right? This is like part of everyday the everyday job of a consultant. Always put their conclusions to the test and see if that makes sense or not. Let's start with the first one. Why you need to use a tree? Because structure again and again and again matters a lot. So you have to be structured. A very good way to solve a market sizing case is first think of only the concepts. So you start with your goal on the top. So let's do that with an example. So I want to know how many golf balls you can fit in a jumbo. So how would you do that? It's quite straightforward. The volume of the jumbo divided by the volume of a golf ball. So you started with your tree, only using concepts first. So you start from what you want, from your objective. You go downwards. Don't think of numbers. So first, one book here also. So what's missing here? Before I continue with this idea here.
Maybe because golf ball, if you fill a jumbo golf ball, not the whole volume will be filled.
Because
they are round and it's possible they are solid.
Yeah.
It's possible to pick them
so that
no space would be filled.
Okay, exactly. So there's a filling constant. So there's always going to be air around the balls. So which one do you prefer? Sorry, I'll give you the options. I gave you the one the more short. The more you want it in English?
Yeah.
We're both in German. Sorry.
They're both in German. Oh. It's better for those who understand.
Yeah.
You can do it to the lady.
Yeah. Come on. No? Okay. So I'm gonna randomly. Yeah, more questions. I'll give you the more expensive one. So that's fine. The thicker and nicer one. Both are nice. Yeah. So you need to put a fitting constant, and then still without thinking of numbers, what's the volume of a jumbo is more or less the volume of a cylinder. Sectional area times length. Sectional area is the radius squared times pi. See that you're always using the tree going from the top to the bottom without thinking of numbers first. What's the volume of a golf ball? It's more or less a diameter to the cube. It's an approximation. Very important point for engineers. This is really something that's always with me. Always think of units. So if you're talking about meters, do the whole thing in meters. Don't do like golf balls, it's 5 centimeters. then you're gonna get like confused. So do 5 centimeters is 0.05 meters. So you don't gonna get confused. So always use the same units. Once we have the structure, no numbers, we start doing calculations only. So we start with the numbers from the bottom upwards. Why is this so important? Because, number one, your brain has two hemispheres. One is very good at concepts, and the other one at numbers, crunching numbers. So if you mix them, you're not going to optimize the way your brain works. So first, you only think of concepts with the right side of your brain. Once you validate the strategy you want to use to calculate how many golf balls fit in a jumbo, then you just start plugging in numbers. What's the radius? 5 meters or 3 meters. What's 5? More or less 3. What's the diameter of a golf ball? 5. And then you just multiply, 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 and you're going to get very fast the number you're looking for. And then when you multiply, you forget length, the sectional area, or diameter. You just think of numbers, crunch numbers, and you're going to be much more efficient. That's reason one. Reason two is, if you somehow make a mistake with your tree, which unfortunately happens very often for all of us, then if you did the calculation with the concepts, which is what most people do, then when you realize you made a mistake, a conceptual mistake, it's going to be too late to come back and think of a new structure, maybe the right one. But if you just did the concepts, you're going to just need like 5 minutes to realize you made a mistake. Whereas if you do the calculations on the go, you're gonna have to spend already 25 minutes of the case. No chance. So you're bound. It's over. So first do the concept, validate it, and then do the number crunching. Any questions? So just an example, plugging in the numbers, multiplying, then we end up with about 14 million golf balls in a jumbo. Second one is finding the trade-off between being fast and being accurate. So round numbers, but do that carefully. You have to ask the interviewers, is it okay if I rounded this pi to 3? Or is it okay if I consider 50 weeks in a year instead of 52? Like sometimes interviewers want to see how good you are with exact calculations. They want to see you dividing 100 by 365, and they want to see how many like decimal places you can calculate correctly. So you have to ask, can I round down 365 to 350? Sometimes, most of the times, they're going to say yes, because they want to see the way you think, not how good you are at calculations. So this is a nice tip. It's kind of advanced, so it's hard to think of everything at the same time. But if you can keep that in mind, like round some numbers up and some down, so that it compensates at the end. If you always round 20% up, 20% up, 20% up, or down, 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 at the end your answer will be like twice as little or as much. So if you can, also try to round the answer, not the inputs, because it might make a big difference. Right? It's not bad if you do 4 times 4, 16, but if you can do the rounding after, so at the result, it's better. Work with averages if the problem is complicated enough, otherwise segment. So if the interviewer says, what's the market of shoes in Brazil? You're not going to say, one average person buys 1 shoe per year, 1 pair of shoes per year, and there are 190 million people in Brazil. That's 190 million pairs of shoes. No, like he's expecting you to talk with him for 20 minutes at least, or for 10 minutes. So if you see that the problem is too simple, segment. If it's already very complicated, if shoes is one of the business units of the company, that wants to open a new factory in Brazil, then you can use the average, right? So it's a fine line where you should segment or simplify the problem. Here goes. How many shoes are sold in Brazil per year? So again, MISI is essential. You're not going to use men, women is MISI, but men, women, and teens. So teens is covering, there's a Überschneidung, intersect, thank you. So, what's wrong here? So, what I did here is, I'm segmenting, this is a very interesting segmentation to know, social classes. I know there's rich people, middle class people, and poorer people. In Brazil, unfortunately, more of the poor. So this is very useful because I know that this property here, social class, changes a lot how many shoes they buy per year, which is something I'm using to calculate how many shoes, right? So we always have to use the property to segment that differentiates better or best the segments. What's missing here? Is that missing? So the question is, how many shoes are sold in Brazil per year? What's missing there? So this is Brazilian population in class A, class B, let's say class C. And let's assume class ABC covers all the Brazilian population. Still there's something missing.
Probably foreigners who are working there or visiting as tourists.
Perfect. What would you say? Just maybe might be also right answers. Who raised their hands?
I was going to say tourists.
Yeah? Very good.
Same to me.
Same for you? So I'm not going to give you another book, but I'm going to give you, so, which one is what? This one? Yeah. And who else? You, of course. And you already have one, so I'm going to give it to someone. Exactly, so not only Brazilian people buy shoes in Brazil. The last times I did this workshop, like people didn't get it, so I had to give a lot of tips, so really good. That's one implicit assumption. So of course tourists are a very small part of the shoes that are sold in Brazil, so you can just assume just Brazilian people buying shoes. But if you assume something, you have to say it. I'm assuming that only Brazilian people buy shoes because that's close to the real number. But if you don't say that, if I am your interviewer, I'm gonna, he missed out something. So it's fine if you assume that, but say out loud, I'm assuming that. So finally, the third rule is do sanity checks. So problems that consultants try to solve are really complex, as I said. And if you see the huge Excel sheets and models that we use, like it's very likely that we're going to make mistakes, right? Even though we go through it 4 or 5 times, it's likely that sometime, at some point, someone's going to make a mistake. For instance, my manager told me the story that 5 minutes before the board meeting, he realized that the revenues that they put on the presentation were too high. So the manager just, it can't be, it's just too high. And no, we did this and that, we went through the whole calculation like 5 times, and then the manager went down, he did a sanity check, it doesn't make sense. Then he found out that they forgot to multiply or to divide by 12, because they were talking about revenues per month, and they were putting the revenues per year. So that's really bad. So there's no there's making mistakes is human. So everybody makes mistakes. Consultants also. The thing is, if you make a mistake, you have to realize it first before your client, right? So if you do sanity checks, that's a great way to say, okay, let's take a step back, look at another perspective, and see if it makes sense, and realize you made a mistake, and then correct it in time. So exactly, that's a lot about common sense. So if I make the calculations, how many golf balls fit in a jar, and I find 1,000, 1,000 balls is something like always can hold. So it doesn't make sense. There's 1,000 missing or something. So small example of sanity check: how many people can stand together on a runway? So where the airplane lands. Again, just a simple calculation, and then we get 250,000 people. Well, if it was 250 people, you know that 250 people can fit in a nightclub, which is very small. And I don't know, a big stadium, football stadium, is more or less 50,000, so it's 5 times a big stadium. Makes sense. Okay, so you're comparing the result you got with something, with things you know you can touch. You have a feel for. So it's okay if your answer is like 2 times off, but there's a problem if your answer is 10 times less or more than the real number.